Everything you think you know about ancient myths is wrong. We believe that the greatest stories of humanity are recent, that myths like Odysseus, King Arthur, or even the Bible's legendary tales emerged in a relatively modern past. But what if I told you that one of the most powerful, most profound epics in human history was written over 4,000 years ago, long before Greece, Rome, or the Bible even existed? This is the Epic of Gilgamesh, the world's first recorded hero's journey, a tale not just of adventure and conquest, but of mortality, loss, and the desperate search for immortality itself. It tells the story of King Gilgamesh, ruler of the mighty city of Uruk, a man who was said to be 2/3 god, 1/3 human, a man whose strength was unmatched, but whose greatest battle was not against monsters or kings, but against his own fear of death. What truths does this epic reveal? What ancient wisdom was written on these clay tablets that still speaks to us today? Today, we will unravel the mysteries of this timeless legend, and in doing so, perhaps discover something about ourselves. Prepare for a journey through time, myth, and the very essence of the human soul. Imagine a ruler so powerful, so feared, that even the gods themselves had to intervene to stop him. In the dawn of civilization, when cities were young and kings were seen as the living hands of the gods, Gilgamesh reigned over Uruk, one of the greatest cities of ancient Sumer, a kingdom located in what we now call Iraq. But Gilgamesh was no ordinary man. According to the clay tablets that narrate his epic, he was 2/3 god and 1/3 human, a being of immense power, but also one plagued by human weakness. His strength was unmatched, his wisdom deep, and his ambition limitless. Legends say that he built the imposing walls of Uruk, a feat that both protected his people and declared his dominance to the world. But power has a price, and Gilgamesh was not a beloved king, he was a tyrant. The people of Uruk lived in fear, their lives overshadowed by his relentless pursuit of conquest, control, and indulgence. He took whatever he desired, ruled with an iron fist, and even invoked the ancient law of the first night, claiming the right to take any bride before her husband. The people could endure no more. They cried out to the Wan, pleading for relief from the uncontrollable force that ruled over them. And the gods answered. From the depths of the wild, they would create an equal, a being powerful enough to match Gilgamesh and challenge his unchecked dominion. But before this fateful meeting, Gilgamesh remained restless, seeking glory, adventure, and a way to make his name eternal. He was a man caught between godhood and humanity, possessing supernatural strength, yet terrified of the one thing he could not escape: death. His greatest battle was yet to come, and it would begin with the arrival of Enkidu. Before civilization, before kings and cities, there was the untamed world. And from it, something emerged, something wild, something unstoppable. Long before he met Gilgamesh, Enkidu belonged to a world untouched by man. He was a creature of pure nature, roaming the vast wilderness, running with the gazelles, drinking from untamed rivers, and hunting alongside beasts. He knew no kings, no walls, no gods demanding worship, only the rhythm of the earth, the whisper of the wind, and the primal freedom of existence. He was nature itself, unshackled, but his presence was not unnoticed. The hunters of Uruk saw him as a threat, for Enkidu had no respect for their ways. He tore apart their traps, freed captured animals, and defied the order imposed by man. To them, he was not a guardian of the wild. He was a danger that had to be tamed, and so they sought the wisdom of Gilgamesh, who devised a plan, not with force, but with something even more powerful: temptation. They sent Shamhat, a priestess of the temple, trained in the arts of seduction and knowledge. Her mission? To civilize Enkidu. For 6 days and 7 nights, Shamhat stayed with Enkidu, drawing him into a world he had never known. Through her, he discovered pleasure, conversation, and the depth of human connection. His wild instincts began to fade. His mind opened to something beyond the forests and rivers. But change comes at a cost. When Enkidu tried to return to his old life, he felt the distance. The animals no longer recognized him. The gazelles ran from him. The rivers felt foreign, and the land he once ruled had abandoned him. He was no longer a beast, but not yet a man. And so Shamhat guided him to Uruk, where he would face his true purpose. For the first time, he walked among stone walls and towering temples, surrounded by crowds, markets, and the whispers of an oppressed people. He heard the fear in their voices, felt the weight of tyranny that loomed over them. And then he learned of Gilgamesh, a king who ruled without limits, a man who saw himself above the gods, above the people, above all things. Enkidu would not allow it. He had been created for one purpose: to challenge the king, to prove that power could be matched, and to remind Gilgamesh that he was not the only force in this world. Their collision was inevitable, and when it came, it would shake the very foundations of Uruk itself. For some, power is enough. For others, it is only the beginning. With Enkidu at his side, Gilgamesh felt an unfamiliar fire awaken within him. The restless thirst for conquest and dominion was no longer enough. He wanted more. He did not seek mere wealth or comfort, nor did he desire to rule in peace. He longed for immortality, not of the flesh, but of the name. He wanted to etch himself into eternity, to be spoken of long after his body had turned to dust. And so he devised a plan, a quest so bold that no mortal before him had dared to attempt it. He would journey to the cedar forest, the sacred land of the Ma'al, and face Humbaba, the monstrous guardian who dwelled within its depths. This was no ordinary beast. Humbaba was a force of nature itself, a creature whose breath was fire, whose roar could shake mountains, and whose very presence spread terror in the hearts of men. He was the divine protector of the forest, placed there by the gods to keep mortals away from that which was forbidden. But for Gilgamesh, the forbidden was simply an invitation. When the people of Uruk heard of his plan, they pleaded with him to turn back. They warned him that no man who entered the cedar forest had ever returned. The priests sought guidance from the gods, and even the elders of Uruk begged their king to reconsider. But Gilgamesh was not a man who bowed to warnings. Enkidu, however, was not as certain. He knew the power of the gods. He had lived among the untouched wilds, where the forces of nature reigned supreme. He feared Humbaba, not because he doubted their strength, but because he understood what it meant to defy the divine order. Still, his loyalty to Gilgamesh was absolute. If his friend was to walk into the unknown, then he would walk beside him. Before departing, they sought the blessing of Shamash, the god of the sun and justice. They made sacrifices, burned offerings, and prayed for his protection. And the god, impressed by their courage, did not warn them to turn back. Instead, he granted them his favor, promising that when the battle came, he would send the winds to aid them. With the sun as their witness, Gilgamesh and Enkidu took up their weapons and left Uruk behind. Their journey was unlike anything they had ever faced. Mountains loomed before them, rivers roared in defiance. The heat of the desert tested their will, but no hardship could weaken Gilgamesh's resolve. Yet as they drew closer, dark omens began to appear. Gilgamesh dreamed of shadows consuming the sky, of a great storm approaching, of a beast's piercing gaze watching from the void. He awoke in terror, recounting these visions to Enkidu, and though his companion tried to reassure him, he too felt the weight of the unknown pressing down upon them. Still, neither turned back, and when they finally stood at the edge of the cedar forest, the air itself changed. The trees were colossal, their canopies stretching so high that they blocked out the sun. The forest whispered as if it were alive, and the scent of ancient power lingered in the wind. They had arrived. But now, Humbaba knew they were there. The earth trembled beneath them. The shadows deepened, and somewhere in the distance, a roar split the silence. The guardian had awakened. Victory comes with a price, and when men defy the gods, the price is always paid in blood. The battle against Humbaba had shaken the very fabric of the earth. With the favor of Shamash, Gilgamesh and Enkidu had done the impossible. They had slain the guardian of the cedar forest, defying the gods and carving their names into legend. They returned to Uruk in triumph, their hands stained with the blood of the divine yarn, their soul burning with the fire of conquest. Songs were sung, feasts were held, and their victory echoed through the kingdom. But the Bush's arm were moving, and the gods do not forget. Their crime was not merely the death of Humbaba, but the arrogance of their defiance. The gods had placed boundaries upon mortals, and Gilgamesh had stepped beyond them. His punishment was already written. But before judgment would come, another test awaited. From the heavens, the goddess Ishtar, radiant and terrible, gazed upon Gilgamesh. His strength, his beauty, his undeniable power, she desired him. She descended before him, her voice as sweet as honey, as sharp as a blade. "Be my husband," she whispered. "Rule beside me, and I shall give you the riches of the gods themselves. Your kingdom will know no famine, no war. All that you desire shall be yours." But Gilgamesh did not bow. He laughed in her face, mocking her, reminding her of the lovers she had taken before, men who had risen to glory only to be cast aside and destroyed. "You are a devourer of kings," he told her, "a goddess who loves only to ruin." The city fell silent. Ishtar's eyes burned with fury. The goddess of love and war had been humiliated, rejected by a mortal king. She ascended to the heavens, her rage shaking the sky. Before the throne of the great god Anu, she demanded vengeance. "If you do not punish Gilgamesh," she declared, "I shall tear open the gates of the underworld and let the dead devour the living." Anu, reluctant but bound by the divine order, granted her request. And so, from the celestial vault, he released the bull of heaven, a colossal beast, a force of destruction, a creature that would tear Uruk apart and make Gilgamesh suffer for his defiance. The ground split open, the sky darkened, and from the abyss, the beast emerged. Its hooves cracked the earth, its breath brought famine, and with every step, it shattered the land beneath it. This was the wrath of the gods made flesh, and only Gilgamesh and Enkidu stood in its way. A man may defy kings, he may defy monsters, he may even defy the gods, but no man can defy death. Gilgamesh and Enkidu had stood against the bull of heaven. And once again, they had done the impossible. They killed it. The city of Uruk erupted in celebration, but in the heavens, the gods were not amused. This time, their punishment would not be negotiated. There would be no divine favor, no second chance. One of them had to die. And so the gods decreed that it would be Enkidu. His suffering began slowly, a fever that burned through his body, a sickness that no healer could cure. The warrior who had once stood against beasts and gods alike was now powerless, trapped in a body that was failing him. In his delirium, he cursed the world that had brought him here. He cursed Shamhat, the woman who had pulled him from the wild and made him a man. He cursed Uruk, its walls, its people, its king. And finally, he cursed the gods themselves, those who toyed with men, those who set the rules of life and death without consequence. But in his final moments, his rage turned to sorrow. He called for Gilgamesh, his brother, his friend, his other half. He blessed their journey, their victories, their battles. He spoke of the wild past they had left behind, of the dreams that had led them to this moment. And then, he was gone. Gilgamesh, the king who had feared nothing, who had stood against Gazan monsters, fell to his knees. For the first time, he knew terror. If Enkidu, strong as a storm, old as the earth itself, could fall to death, then what chance did he have? The thought consumed him. He could not, would not accept the fate of all men. And so he abandoned Uruk. He left his throne, his crown, his riches. Dressed in rags, wandering like a man who had lost his soul, he set out to find the one thing that could save him, the secret of eternal life. For weeks, he wandered the earth, crossed mountains, through deserts, past rivers where the sun never reached. His body withered, his mind darkened, but still he pressed on. Until at last he found the one man who could give him the answer. A man who had lived before the great flood. A man who had survived when the gods destroyed the world. A man who had been granted immortality. Utnapishtim. Gilgamesh stood before him, a shadow of the king he had once been, and begged, "Tell me, how did you escape death?" Utnapishtim sighed. He had heard these words before. He had seen many men come searching for the same answer. And so he told his story. Long ago, the gods grew tired of mankind. They saw humans as noisy, rebellious, flawed. So they decided to wipe them out. They sent a flood so great, so powerful that it swallowed the earth itself. But one god, Ea, the wise, had pity on one man. He whispered to Utnapishtim, warning him of what was to come. He told him to build a great vessel, to fill it with the seed of every living thing, and to wait. For 7 days and 7 nights, the storm raged. The sky turned black, the world drowned, and then silence. Utnapishtim's vessel came to rest on a mountain, and he made an offering to the gods. The gods, now regretful of their own destruction, granted him and his wife immortality, making them the only humans to ever escape death. Gilgamesh, desperate, begged him, "Then tell me, how can I live forever?" But Utnapishtim only shook his head. "You are not meant to." Still, he gave Gilgamesh one last chance. "If you can stay awake for 7 days and 7 nights, you will prove that you have mastery over death." Gilgamesh tried, but he was exhausted. His body had been pushed beyond its limits, his mind clouded by sorrow and time. And before he knew it, he had fallen asleep. When he awoke, Utnapishtim showed him the proof of his failure. 7 loaves of bread, each one older than the last, marking the days that had passed. Gilgamesh had lost his only chance. Defeated, he prepared to return to Uruk, empty-handed. But as he turned to leave, Utnapishtim's wife, pitying the broken king, whispered a final secret. At the bottom of the ocean, she told him, grew a plant that restored youth. A final spark of hope ignited in Gilgamesh. He dived into the waters, fought against the depths, and clutched the miraculous plant in his hands. He had done it. He had cheated death. But on his journey home, as he rested by a river, a serpent emerged from the shadows. Before he could react, the snake devoured the plant, and as it slithered away, it shed its skin, renewed once more. Gilgamesh watched in silence. The secret to eternal life had slipped through his fingers, and in that moment, he understood the truth he had refused to face. Immortality was never meant for men, but that did not mean he was without a legacy. His name, his deeds, his story, those would live on long after his body had turned to dust. His journey had come to an end, and he finally knew what it meant to be human. A king may build the tallest walls, a warrior may carve his name in legend, but in the end, all men must face the same fate. Gilgamesh returned to Uruk a changed man. He had set out seeking immortality, believing that his strength, his courage, his very will could bend the laws of existence. He had crossed mountains, walked through deserts, and stood before gods. And yet the secret of eternal life had slipped from his grasp. For the first time, he gazed upon his city, not as a king seeking conquest, not as a god in human form, but as a man who understood his place in the cycle of life. He stood before the towering walls of Uruk, the very ones he had ordered built, the ones that had protected his people for generations. And in those stones, in those streets, in the people who walked them, he saw his true legacy, not in living forever, but in being remembered. Gilgamesh had feared that death would erase him, that his story, his existence, would fade into nothingness. But he finally understood. Immortality was never meant for the body. It was meant for the soul, carried forward in the words and memories of those who came after. He had already achieved it, for as long as the walls of Uruk stood, as long as its people spoke his name, he would never truly die. And so the great king accepted his fate. He did not defeat death, but in the end, he had conquered time itself. And that was enough. The Epic of Gilgamesh is not just an ancient myth. It is the first great story of humanity, the first recorded tale of a hero's rise and fall, his struggles, his triumphs, and his ultimate realization. And after 4,000 years, his name is still spoken. His story is still told. His search for meaning, his journey, his fears, his dreams are still ours. And that is the greatest form of immortality there is. Thanks for watching.